Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We've got a good topic today, a new topic, a bit of a sad topic, but necessary. Let's do it. What's the worst way you found out that someone had passed away? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was at my grandpa's funeral. It's one way to find out. I'm 24 at the time. I was the only one from my immediate family there. I was asking around where my uncle was, my grandpa's son. I asked his wife. She told me that he decided to stay at the hotel. He didn't want to come. After the funeral, we go to dinner for family only. Immediately after grace was said, the wife from earlier stood up and announced to everyone at the table that my uncle hung himself back at the hotel, that he was still there, and she needed to go take care of it. Got pulled out of school in the 4th grade being told it was something about my sister. Spent the day at my aunt's house. No one would tell me what was happening. Went to the hospital that evening. My mother was there sobbing. She said, "Go see your sister." I was like, "Oh, thank God she's okay." I was really worried there. She was dead on a table. She was effing blue. Pretty effed up. My dad's boss, a principal at a school, called because he didn't show up at work. He lived in a small town and everyone had heard about the overturned cattle car. I called him, got no answer, then called the local police department and asked after him. They thought I was a reporter, and so I left my contact details and they were told they'd get back to me. I was actually in the middle of my transition from my first professional job to getting back to school, as I had done some good work for the company and they actually gave me a minor going away party. In the middle of the going away event, I got the call. My dad was being airlifted to the nearest hospital. I don't know what my face looked like or exactly what I said, but I know I was on the road to the city in under 20 minutes. On the way to the hospital, I called my mom and told her I was on the way to the hospital and why. As soon as I got there, I was shown into a small room and told my father had died en route. As it was a fatal crash, I had to talk to the cops and was handed his effects after I was confirmed as his son. I was told that it would not be advised to see him. My mother showed up a bit later. I let her know. We cried. As we headed out the door, my mother asked about how Dad looked, and I said I was told not to see him. She latched onto this as possibility that it wasn't Dad. I had to show her his wallet and convince her not to do that to herself. A lot of crying happened in the parking garage. We ended up deciding to let my youngest brother finish up the school day and telling him once he got home. The other brother was told via phone as he lived a good distance away once we were sure he was with his girlfriend. TL, DR, was told about my dad in the middle of a small party for me with all the people I worked with, and then had to tell my mother and brothers my father had died. That's very sad. This brought up a lot of stuff for me, which I may talk about in a different post, but I'm sorry. And that's tough. This one got me. I got a call at the house from a detective asking to speak to my stepdad, who was out with my mom on a motorcycle. The detective wouldn't tell me what it was in regards to, but asked me to forward his information. His business had been broken into a few weeks earlier, so I assumed it was in regards to that. I called and left a voicemail on both parents' phones. About an hour passes and the detective calls again. I call and leave voicemails again. About an hour later, my step-aunt calls. Then step-uncle from another state, then a cousin, then a family friend, all asking for my stepdad. No one will say why they're calling, and my parents still aren't home. But I have figured out someone has died. Then people start coming to the house, friends of my stepdad, employees, coworkers, etc. Some leave when they realize he isn't there, and some just sit out in front of their cars. Still no one will tell me why. When my parents finally made it home, my mom has to sit down and can't get out any words, so instead, I asked if my stepsister had died, and she just nodded. It's certainly probable isn't the worst of the answers here, but fielding all of those calls and people coming by without actually knowing what was going on is very scary. I did a random Google search for my father on my birthday, as ours are close together. He and I hadn't talked for a few years, as his current wife didn't like him contacting or acknowledging his kids from his first marriage. I ran across his obituary 2 months after he died. My brother, my sister, and I were left out of the obituary, and certainly were also left out of the will. I called his widow to be sure it wasn't a misprint or mistake. Then she confirmed it was him. When pressed on why my siblings and I weren't notified, she said something along the lines of, "We were busy. Our kids just lost their father," as if she was denying our loss. My brother added an addended comment to the obit, mentioning his first marriage, his kids, and the grandkids he never met. One of his first replacement kids with the step monster found out about us through the addition to the obit, which caused a rift between him and Step. Good. That bitch erased us. I'm in contact with one of his kids, but only through the occasional LinkedIn message. Went to wake my 19-year-old cousin up after spending the night. I was 12, spending time with my 13-year-old cousin. I ran in, jumped on the bed, and he wasn't on it. He was curled up on the floor next to it. I touched his face, and it was cold. His eyes wouldn't open, no response. I ran out of his room and yelled for my auntie. Her face dropped, like she already knew. She called the ambulance, and we went to the hospital where he was declared dead. He had overdosed on heroin, was home from rehab. They called it camp, less than a week. I never knew he was an addict. To me, he was a kind, patient, strong, tender-hearted goofball. I always carry Naloxone kit. My brother's birthday party. He didn't usually have a birthday party, but this year he did. It was a big effing deal. Lots of people, lots of shenanigans, big redneck affair. It was interrupted by a phone call that my grandpa had shot himself, which was followed by the party obviously ending in a mad drive to my grandpa's house, only to find the cops detaining my aunt for murder because my grandpa had taken 2 shots to complete the job. She didn't murder him, obviously, but it was awkward. Finding out grandpa died that way while celebrating was the worst, probably. Such a drastic change from happy to life-changing sad. Grandpa died, and I get it, but the way he died just kind of made things more bad. Getting the phone call when I was in the break hours of a split shift. My mom called and asked what I was up to, and I was like, oh, open the bar, and now I'm just hanging for a few hours until I gotta go back in for the evening. Oh, well, maybe I'll just tell you later. Come on, bro. You can't leave me hanging. Just spit it out now. Your dad died. Oh, well, I'll deal with that later. Took my break to let it sink in. Walked into a neighboring bar to my work just to go ahead and have a beer and a shot to lubricate my future interactions. And the bartender, who I was very familiar with, said, "Hey, how's it going?" I almost responded. My mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and the tears spilled from my eyes unbidden. After a few seconds, I said, "I'm sorry, dude, you didn't need that." And he said, "Bartender therapist, I do it all. You weren't the first person to cry at me." He knew what I usually ordered and served it up on the house. I made it through my shift that night, being my usual cheerful, friendly self, but every time I had a moment alone, the knowledge was there in the back of my mind. My dad is dead. I made it through another day or two, mostly emotionally unscathed, and then I locked my keys in my car, again, and had to sit outside of my house waiting for the locksmith for an hour, and I rapidly progressed through every stage of grief I'd been holding on to. When the locksmith rolled up, I dried my eyes, and we chuckled a bit and made small talk, and still in the back of my mind, my dad is dead. Grief hits us all differently. I know after I lost my father, the first week I was pretty much okay. It was actually months later when I really had this catharsis and I really lost it. But again, story for another time. This is about you guys, not me. My dad. It was Father's Day. He was completely fine in the morning, drove me to work, told me find a ride back because he was going to have a celebratory drink. Have a good day, he said. I come home at 10 p.m. Lights are all off, TV off, door unlocked, his truck in the driveway. I called out for him, but only silence answered. I slowly turned on the lights as I walked through the house, looked for him on his couch in the living room, looked the other way down the hall and saw a leg peeking out of the bathroom doorway. Freaked out. It was the only light left on. He fell backwards into the tub. Don't know if he died on impact or because he couldn't get up. They said he tried to catch himself and pulled the sink off the wall. Paramedics say it was a heart attack, but I'm sure him being drunk didn't help. I'll never forget how he looked laying there. It was hard to take a shower for a while after it all happened with the image burned into my head. When he said, "Dear old dad's not going to be around forever," I didn't think he meant when I was 22. Weirdly enough, at Disneyland, asked a worker which way Tarzan was, and he told me that unfortunately it was closed that day. But he saw it was my first visit, so he said, "Follow me," and gave me and my boyfriend front row seats to watch the Fantasia show. Pretty nice gesture. About 5 minutes into the show, I get a call that my second mom died of an aneurysm at 49. Let me tell you, crying in the happiest place on earth while the fireworks go off is traumatic. I was sitting in my English class taking the end-of-year final test when the principal's secretary came into the classroom. She crouched next to my desk and said, "Your mother called. Your grandma passed away." After saying that, she just walked out of the room, leaving me stunned. I went to a strict private Christian school and had to finish the final and another one for math. They wouldn't let me take them at a later time. One of the many reasons why I became an atheist. Well, that is just awful and very insensitive. How could they expect you to focus on your task at hand after hearing news like that, especially if you were very close to that relative? Sorry. I've never told anyone about this, so sorry if it's long. By the way, I'm the oldest of 4. I have 1 full brother and 2 half-siblings. So when I was younger, my mom married a guy who pretended to be nice in front of my mom, but when she was gone for a week, he'd show his true colors. My mom worked at a factory. He'd beat me and my brother constantly. Anything we did, he'd beat us up for it. I remember one time he pinned me up against a wall because I hadn't charged his phone while he took a nap. Anyways, you get the gist. On his birthday, I forgot to mention, he did drugs. He overdosed. My brothers and sister were there at the time. I was in my room when my brothers and sister came into the room saying, "My mom's husband is not waking up. He's on the floor in the bathroom." I get up and go to the bathroom door, and he's lying down by the toilet, which was next to the door. I remember his head was facing the floor, and his hand was in the toilet. I thought maybe he was sleeping. I was 8 at the time, so I had my sister scream really loud. I had my brother spill water on him. I don't remember what else we tried. I thought maybe we should call Mom. Then I saw his phone on the bathroom counter. We gave up what we thought he was sleeping, and we would wake up soon. When we went to sleep, and then morning came, I hear that Mom had come home to take a nap and go to her second job. I went to go say hi, and I remembered my mom's husband's name hadn't woken up yet. I said, "Oh yeah, my mom's husband's name hasn't woken up yet in the bathroom." She says, "What?" and tells me to go to my room. I went into my room and started playing Roblox on my tablet. I heard my mom saying mom's husband's name. I thought nothing of it because he's a deep sleeper. Then like maybe 30 minutes go by, I hear police sirens and I check the window and I see 2 cop cars enter my apartment facility. My grandma and grandpa came. My grandma took me and my siblings out of the apartment, covering my eyes so I wouldn't see what they were doing. A week later, we went to his funeral, and I remember all the emotions I was feeling. I was sad, but I was happy at the same time, because I knew he wouldn't hurt us again. I told my mom I miss when he would beat me, and she gave me a mad look. Yeah, this was long. Sorry. I needed to let some of my feelings out.